What's up, everyone? Welcome to BJJ and Brews. I'm your host, Noah John, joined by my co-host, Christopher Vu. Chris, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm doing well.
In today's conversation, we're actually talking with someone that Chris is more familiar with. He goes back a long way with this guy.
Familiar is a good word.
Yeah.
We go back a long way, actually, kind of. He's the most senior person of the OG crew here that nobody actually knows about, but he's a tough dude. His name's Stan Rousonelos. He's a friend of mine who I've sort of developed over the years by way of Cogito Jiu-Jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
That's where he trains primarily.
He's trained primarily from Dylan's gym. Super nice guy, family guy. I wanted to pick his brain a little bit about balancing dad life with jiu-jitsu life. It was a lot of conversation. He's had a lot of life experience.
Absolutely. His story goes all over the world, so it's a very interesting one. We get to some jiu-jitsu in the end, but really it's just an interesting journey about how he went basically all around the world and
has like 400 fights or something. He's like the Hickson Gracie of Central
fights.
Florida.
Yeah. So you'll hear all about that. It was definitely an interesting conversation. It was awesome. Stan took a lot of time to sit down with us, which was awesome. And he got to train, too.
Yes, he did.
And he got to roll with a slightly hungover Paul Rodriguez, which I thought was pretty hilarious. But, yeah, so that conversation will be next. As always, like, subscribe, share. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook, BJJ and Brews. You can always email us, bjjandbrews@gmail.com. But without further ado, let's get to that conversation. And we're off. Chris, good morning. Do a little ching ching.
Good morrow to you. Stan, welcome. We finally have you on the show.
I'm glad to be here.
I didn't realize that was 10 months ago that I had invited you.
Hey, no worries. I mean, I never really made an appointment to come. You were like, hey, whenever you want to come on by.
That's awesome though, man. So it's interesting that you're with us today. I feel as though I was telling Noah, because he's like, hey, how do you really know Stan? I'm like, I'm super familiar with you. And I think you're very, very familiar with me, but we actually don't know each other.
Well, this is a chance, right?
This is a chance, exactly.
This is an opportunity.
This is a great opportunity.
I think this is a good day to be here as well, because you know that this is the only day that you won't have another person on this podcast on this day for 4 years.
Oh, that's right. It's the 29th.
February 29th.
So, well, I'll get you on the calendar the next time you're here. So, Stan, okay. I know, first off, beautiful family, by the way.
Thank you.
You know, like, but
that's my life right now.
I know it is. I totally know it is. You're a teacher.
I am.
4 kids?
3 kids.
3 kids. Okay.
Don't jinx me.
No, there's 3 kids.
Maybe Chris knows something you don't.
And also former pro fighter.
Former amateur fighter.
Former amateur fighter.
Never fought pro. Okay. I had an opportunity, but
you have the most incredible backstory. So, like, from what I've pieced together, or just through Facebook posts and just through other people I know. First off, you're from South Florida, right? That's
correct.
Okay. What brought you up to Orlando? And
man, I guess I'd really have to start with what brought me to Florida. I actually moved to Tallahassee years ago for a pretty girl. I've since been through a couple pretty girls and ended up marrying one of the pretty girls I met in Tallahassee. So it's good I ended up there. But I met my now wife in Tallahassee, and after we graduated together, we moved to South Korea, and then we moved back to.
What? How? What?
So while I was in school for nursing, and I decided to be a English teacher, to teach English as a foreign language. So I got my TOEFL certification. My wife did as well. So we decided we were going to teach abroad, and we were going to travel for like 5 years from country to country and teach English as a foreign language and get to know the world. And
quick, complete ignorance on my end.
No, you're fine.
When teaching English, do you have to know the language in which you're living at that moment?
They actually prefer the opposite. And it's not to say they prefer the opposite, but when you're in the classroom, they want you to speak only English. Okay? Because at these programs, especially in the English programs in South Korea, that's what I have experience with at least. But this is, from what I understand, kind of how it is, from nation to nation. They want you to speak English in the classroom because they already have natives that are English teachers as well, but they don't have mastery over the English language like we do. Okay, so they can teach them fundamental things that we can't teach them in their own language about English, but we're teaching them conversational English, and we want to get them to use English in the classroom. So if they think we only speak English, then they're forced to speak to us in English.
I can confirm this because I taught English in Spain for 2 years, working the bilingual program that the Spanish government put together. So they had a program where they brought natives from English-speaking countries, so from America, Canada, the UK, Australia, to be English assistants. The requirements weren't as high. We didn't have to have the TOEFL, so we were used as teaching assistants in the classroom, but the same rule applied. They didn't want the students to know if you spoke Spanish or not, so they didn't really care. Right. So obviously I had to learn Spanish to survive outside of that, but in the classroom, I think only until the very end of my second year did I like say something in Spanish to freak the kids out. And then at that point, I think they tried to speak with me in Spanish the rest of the time that I worked there. So it's definitely, if they think you only speak English, then it obligates these kids. And again, we're dealing with, I'm imagining you dealt with kids, right?
All different ages.
Yeah. So with kids in particular, the psychology there is, if they think they can only communicate with this wild, crazy American dude in English and there's no option to speak in Spanish because I'm like, I don't understand if they speak to me, in Spanish, then it's another excuse for them to practice that. And in my case, to your point, well, I wasn't doing the advanced grammar per se, even though I was helping out as much as I could. There was a lot of pronunciation. If you actually go out and learn another language and then come back, you realize how English is not phonetic. So Spanish is phonetic. I don't know what about Korean? Is Korean phonetic?
I would say Korean is probably tonal.
Okay. So what ends up happening is if you write a word in English, how do you explain to someone how to pronounce it?
It's rote memorization.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas in Spanish, every letter has a single sound. So if I get written a word and I know what the letters sound like, I can pronounce it.
So how long were you in Korea?
We were in Korea for a year. We had a year contract there. And, again, the plan was to go to a new country after that.
Did you pick up any Korean while you were there?
A little bit. Like, we knew how to say hello, goodbye, take me to, like when you got in a cab, be like, 가주세요, and then wherever you wanted to go, so you would learn how to tell people, like, how to take you places. You would learn how to say how much and just simple things.
So that was your early 20s-ish? Or
no, this was in my 30s. I was already in my 30s.
Oh, really?
I was in college for a long time. I was probably in college for long enough to get a PhD. I went through multiple programs, and I kind of, while I was waiting to get in the nursing program, I was taking a lot of other courses and elective courses. And when I finally got in, my heart wasn't in it. And the nursing program is not the kind of program you can be in and not have your heart set on it because it's around the clock studying.
Oh,
you got to be all in. It's pre-med basically. You got to be all in. And I wasn't all in. And then I decided I took
How
a TEFL.
far in was it before you decided you're like,
I was about a year into the nursing program. And
this was at FSU, I'd assume?
I was at a program at TCC, Tallahassee Community College. Okay. And then I took a TEFL certification course over the summer by the recommendation of my friend Ramin. Shout out to Ramin. And Ramin said, hey, why don't you try this out over the summer, see what it's like. It's a 6-week course. And I did it, and I was working with the kids. And these kids are college students, but they were international students. So they came over, and this is kind of like an entry program, this program there. We would work with the kids. So we had, a TEFL certification class, but then we would work with international students who have to take the TESOL exam so that they can enter a American university. So I got to work with a lot of different kids, mostly kids from East Asia and from the Middle East. But it was really cool, like teaching them something and seeing the lights go on and just approaching material different ways and seeing how they took to it. And I just loved it.
Are you responsible for making your own curriculum?
It was it was interesting in the TEFL certification program. We had like guidelines, and we had this kind of like textbook that we worked off of, and we had guidelines, and then we would create lessons based on those guidelines. So based on what kind of specific information we were covering, and we would create different lessons, and then they would ask us to try to implement them to a certain classroom. And I started teaching some extra classes afterwards, where I had this kind of fun thing that I did it in Korea as well, where I would take like pop songs, like American pop songs from all different generations, and I would just pull words out of them. So it would be a listening activity, and I would have the kids listen to them, and then they would have to try to fill in the blanks and figure out what are the words they're saying. And then we
like to try to put it in the context of like pop music's actually garbage.
Not so much. I mean, I would take, I would even take something like, an old Beatles track or something like that. So, I mean, it's still pop, it was pop for that time, but it would be from different generations. So, it was usually music I would like because I would have to play it over and over and over again. So I would have to listen to it over and over again. So it wouldn't want to be something.
Did you ever end up playing my 80s soundtrack during your class, by the way?
No, I don't think I did.
Oh, fail.
I know.
It was my 80s training montage.
And that was?
It was awesome. But either way, so you
that was a good listening activity. So we did things like that. And it was nice because it doesn't become just a listening exercise then, and then it's like they have to listen, then they have to transcribe, and then then you try to explain to them the meaning. You break down the meaning of the lyrics to them. And a lot of times it's songs are poetry, so it's metaphors and idioms and things that they start to understand culture a little more as well, because they have to learn it, because attached to language is culture automatically. We don't think about it when you're living in it, and especially if you only know one language. But there's things that we say all the time and we understand the meaning, like, oh, I slept like a rock. It's like, oh, well, that makes you understand what it means. It's like, oh, I slept like a baby. That makes perfect sense to you. But when you go to another language, if you try to translate that into another language, they might not have the same idiom there. So it might be meaningless to them. So automatically attached to every language is the culture that the language is used in.
I've not traveled outside the country too much, so
you suck, Chris. It's funny. I did the exact same exercise I used to do. I did it more with I got to teach private English classes outside of my responsibilities in the school, and I would do that with a couple of those students. Although I didn't take it. I was playing more pop songs. I remember playing Katy Perry because there was there's a song where she's up and there's down, there's left and there's right. So I would just at least it was super easy for like a 10-year-old to fill in. But I definitely didn't go to the poetic meaning of the song and how it relates to. I know. So what happened after South Korea?
And so hang on, are you doing martial arts at this time too? Or no?
I was actually. I went to South Korea. I was looking for a judo or jiu-jitsu school in my area, but it's kind of hard. I mean, you don't have a car, so it's kind of hard to get from place to place. You take taxis, you take the bus, you take the train. And the closest school, we lived in a little I say a little village. It was called Jangyu, and I say a little village, but everything is pretty developed there now. Like even this used to be farmland, but it's pretty far removed from a bigger city, which is Gimhae, and then Gimhae is even closer to a bigger city, which is called Busan, and a lot of people know Busan. Busan is
there's a train that goes there.
That's right.
Have you seen the movie Train to Busan?
From the movie?
It's an awesome zombie movie, by the way.
I haven't seen it yet, but I want to. I know. I heard it's incredible.
Are you gonna start saying, "Oh, there's a river called the Kwai"? He's like, "Oh, there's a bridge over that."
But
you're such an old man, like John Wayne movies.
Busan is one of the two major cities. Okay, it's like Busan is like the big city in the south, and then Seoul is the big city in the north. So usually people know one of those two cities. Well, Gimhae is close to there, smaller than Busan, but bigger than Jangyu, and Jangyu is smaller than that. And it used to be a farmland. I mean, this country has developed so much in 50 years that it's like they're still trying to catch up with their technological developments culturally. But anyway, so I went to a jiu-jitsu school a couple times. It was in Gimhae, but it was like a 45-minute commute.
Was it John Frankel's?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't know who. There was actually the.
Did you just do that thing where it's like you're in Korea? Do you know this one Korean person?
So he's like the father of jiu-jitsu in like Korea or South Korea, excuse me. So,
still kind of a stretch.
Yeah. Am I allowed to say South Korea? Do I have to say South Korea? Or am I allowed to just say Korea?
South Korea.
I think it's South Korea. But anyway, so I think this school actually, I'm sure he's advanced much more than then, but he was a then blue belt who was running the school.
What were you at that moment?
I was a blue belt at that time.
You were a blue belt, okay.
Yeah. I think I was probably a 5-year blue belt at the time.
Oh, you're part of the club. So just to backtrack a little bit, where did you start training jiu-jitsu though? I
started training jiu-jitsu first in Joliet, Illinois. It's the town I grew up in. It's near Chicago, about 30, 45 minutes away from Chicago. It's an interesting little town. Consists of 2 correctional facilities, 2 high schools, a minor league baseball team, a dirty river that cuts through the middle of it, and kind of parts the social classes right down the middle. It's an interesting town to grow up in, but it's really not that bad.
How many jiu-jitsu schools were there?
When I started training there, I would say there were 0 jiu-jitsu schools, and the school that I trained at was an MMA school. And the instructors studied various martial arts.
What year was this? Just so we have some context.
2003.
2003. Okay.
Oh, you're super old school.
I've been around for a long time.
This is why he was a blue belt for 5 years. He couldn't find a higher belt to promote him.
All right, yeah. So he's like doing the wandering warrior thing,
So these 2 instructors, they actually ran a PE program for me or not for me rather, but for my school. I was at alternate school when I was in high school before I went to military school, and they ran a PE program at a community center, and so I knew them as great martial artists through that, and I got to know them through that, and I had a couple friends who studied with them after school. So I left town, I went off to the Navy. Well, I went to military school, I went to the Navy, I moved to Florida, I came back from Florida, and I started training with them in Joliet. And when I walked into the gym for the first time, the head instructor, really the 2 head instructors, Ron Hill and James Hill, they pulled me aside and they were like, hey, you're prior Navy, you're in good shape. You seem like you'd be a good fit for this. We're trying to form a fight team right now because this was a time when MMA was getting really big.
This is right on the cusp of the Ultimate Fighter, basically, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And in the Midwest, it was mostly stand-up. It was mostly striking, mostly kickboxing up there. But he said, hey, if you come and train for us, we'll train you for free. Just you have to fight for us, And I was like, perfect. He's like, we'll make you a killer in 3 months. And 3 months later, I was in the ring for the first time.
So you had interest in actually fighting? I mean,
my interest was in martial arts in general. Before that, I had studied karate and I'd studied boxing a little bit, but never dedicated to anything. But I was like, when I came back to Illinois, I was like, I want to do martial arts. This is what I want to do. I want to train hard. I want to get strong. I want to get better at martial arts. And so they pulled me aside and they made me this offer, and I had no aspirations of fighting at the time, but I was like, well, this seems like a no-brainer. I want to get strong, I want to get better, and if I throw myself into this, it's going to happen. And so I agreed, and 3 months later, I was in my first kickboxing match.
Did you have looking back, do you think you had a concept of what MMA was when they made you this offer and we're going to make you a killer in 3 months?
I had little concept. It's not nearly what I have now. It's not the understanding I have now for sure. I mean, I used to watch on pirated VHS tapes. I watched the original Ultimate Fighters, the original UFCs, from 91 and 93, and then they were only pay-per-view and they were hard to get. But I think we got them from a local Blockbuster type store. It was a local rental store, and we had double recorded them, so we had copies of them and we watched those.
Put a little piece of tape over the tab that was ripped out.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that's how you copied them.
We're so old, Stan.
2 VCRs, right? 2 VCRs, double copy them, right? So, we had pirated versions of that, and, we watched those. So, I had an idea what MMA was, and I saw it evolve over a decade, but I wasn't closely following it, so I didn't know necessarily what it was. But my major focus then in 2003 was mostly kickboxing fights. I mean, they had a jiu-jitsu class, they had a striking class, but most of my fights, my early fights, were all striking. So it was always like, Stan, you're going to be on a bag today. You know, you can watch them play jiu-jitsu, but you're going to be on a bag today.
Was jiu-jitsu done in a gi or was it all no gi because it was MMA school?
It was done both.
Okay.
It was done in gi and no gi. They had gi days and no gi days. But it was primarily gi. Most of the classes then were taught by Stanley Hong, he's out in California now. He's a black belt now. And I think he was then a blue belt, and then he got promoted to purple belt not too much long after that. And then most of the other classes were taught by Renshi and Tashi, Master Ron Hill and Master James Hill. And but me, I spent most of my time either kicking a bag or sparring, and you know it was notoriously, you know, hard sparring because that's what it was back then, you know. So
you got your blue belt under them after 3 months of training, or no. You had your first fight after 3 months of training.
I had my first fight after 3 months of training.
Only not MMA.
It was striking. It was you know, full contact rules or American style kickboxing.
So low kicks also though, right? Or
no low
above
kicks.
The waist?
Above the waist.
Okay.
Kick counter, which kind of screwed me because I don't think I got my kicks and I was just going out there boxing.
Oh my God, yeah, that's
yeah. But I fought, you know, in 3 years with them, because I ended up leaving in 2006 to move to Tallahassee. But in 3 years with them, I had, I think, 15 fights or something like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And
do you really? You have like more fights than some guys in the UFC. Like
I have,
before they got into the UFC.
I have about 30 fights total.
Do you really?
Fights, yeah.
What's the breakdown between MMA and kickboxing?
It's hard to say, but I have like 3 or 4 MMA fights. I fought full contact rules. I fought international rules. I fought Muay Thai. I fought Sanshao or Sanda. It's the same thing, but by different names. I fought in Russia twice at
what the hell?
Yeah, I was on a USA team twice. No, but
Rousonelos.
But because I was, you know, friends and a student of Ron and James Hill, they had these, you know, they were always part of these like USA teams where they're traveling abroad.
Oh, cool.
and yeah, so they would, even though I was in Florida, they'd be like, hey, you want to go with us to Russia?
For Sanda?
This is for, actually, it's called Rukampashny Boy. It's like judo and kickboxing combined.
Wouldn't that be MMA?
It's not. It's not, because you wear a gi.
And you wear shorts? Do you wear Sambo shorts?
Nope. You wear full gi. And you wear kind of like MMA gloves and headgear. You can only kick and punch above the waist. But you grab and you take them down. And if you go to the ground, you have, just like in judo, you have like 20 seconds to finish the fight. They stand you back up, and then you're going again.
Dude, so you've done fucking everything. You're
I've
the most complete martial artist in Central Florida.
I don't know about that.
What was that? Was it Fight Quest or something?
Yeah, there was a show, actually two at the time. One was on Discovery Channel, one was on like Travel Network, called Fight Quest, and there's another one that I really liked. I actually applied to be on it, called Last One Standing. It was a collaboration between Discovery Channel and BBC, and it was basically you traveled around, and they had like one guy in each weight class doing like sort of like male rituals for like different cultures, and one of them was like wrestling. I was like, oh man, like I've done kickboxing and jiu-jitsu, like I could actually probably do well in this like show, right? But then like it didn't pan out, obviously, because I'm sitting here on a couch drinking beer with guys in the morning
before class.
Before class. But
hashtag Keto with my tribe.
So you had a wealth of experience before even going to Korea then.
Yeah. And then in Korea, I ended up training. There was a place about 15 minutes from my school by bike, because I bought a little like bike for like $80 used.
Your wife's with you in Korea also.
She was with me then.
Or
yeah.
your girlfriend, whatever. Yeah, at the moment.
Then girlfriend.
Okay.
Then girlfriend.
Does she train?
She doesn't train.
Okay.
I mean, she's wrangling around 3 little boys.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's.
She has to do.
Not back then.
No.
She has to deal with me. That's training. But so I found a kickboxing school in Jangyu through a friend who did all my. She lived in Canada, but she was Korean, so she did all the translation for me whenever I needed it. But I found this kickboxing school, and it was a Hapkido black belt. He probably got his Hapkido black belt very young, because you get, you know, Taekwondo and Hapkido black belts very young.
Do you hear that, Chris?
I'm already like, starting my like my Tourette's twitch is starting to kick in.
And then he moved to Thailand and he trained Muay Thai for like 1 or 2 years or something like that. And he actually trained with Senchai when he was over there as well.
Really?
Yeah.
So he's like legit.
Yeah.
And this is before you got to train with him.
This is before I trained.
Oh man, so
yeah.
you got like second gen knowledge.
Yeah,
there.
it was
Okay.
pretty cool. He actually gave me a pair of shorts that Senchai gave him that I
that's
still
awesome.
have. Yeah, legit. But he was awesome, super cool coach, and he spoke like 10 words of English. You know, so it was always funny. Like, you know, us like communicating with each other was always a challenge, and there were a few students of his who spoke, you know, decent English that would help to translate for us when needed to be, like, especially if like we had like a competition coming up or something like that. We had to communicate like what weight I had to be at and what were the rules and
Hang
stuff
on,
like
you
that.
were competing in Korea as well?
Yeah, why not?
You're crazy. Dude.
I know. I am.
Oh my god.
They weren't holding back with this guy. They were like, "Oh, he's not from this tribe. Let's take him out."
Round eye in there and beat people up.
Yeah.
So what kind of fights did you have in Korea?
Kickboxing. It was all
okay.
kickboxing. He was a kickboxing guy. But it was cool. It was just cool getting a different look because, you know, the way he threw kicks, you know, you would think it's the same, but it's like the way he threw kicks was different than the way I was trained to throw them. You know, his emphasis was really on speed and snap, and mine was always on power. And, you know, maybe it was designed that way for me because that's just, you know.
Have you always been, because you're like 185, 190 now?
I was.
I'm
205 to 215.
What
I
the
fluctuate in there.
fuck?
Yeah, over the past
Eating
year.
fucking omelets and you
I
got to that
started,
size?
I started eating a lot and I started lifting. I've never been on a regular lifting program and I just got big.
Really? God
Yeah.
damn, man.
Yeah, it's been great.
I was like, when you hugged me this morning, I was like, oh, geez. got some little girth going on there.
Yeah.
So what was your weight then?
I was walking around at probably about $180.
Okay.
And I took one fight there. I took it 155, so I cut for that.
From 180?
Yeah, it was
As
a
an
little bit of fight.
amateur?
Yeah,
You're fucking
I dropped
crazy.
12 pounds in one day for that fight because they have these things called jimjilbongs. I think that's pronounced correctly. And it's like the perfect setting for weight cutting. It's like these spas for men and women, and they have saunas. Okay, I mean they're separate, men and women.
Oh.
We're both looking at each other like, "Uh-huh."
And they
All
have in these jimjilbongs, they have cool pools, they have warm pools, and they have hot pools that are like stupid hot, like almost boiling hot. And they have saunas that are like 3 different temperatures as well. And it goes from like, you know, your average temperature sauna to like you can't stay in it for longer than 5 minutes sauna. Like, I don't even know what the temperature is in there. I can't even quote you right off the top of my head, but it's stupid hot in these things. But it was perfect because I just hung out there for 6 hours and dropped the weight I needed to drop. And I would.
How much free time did you have in Korea to actually do this sort of stuff? Like,
It was weird. My schedule was kind of weird because I worked at what was called a Hagwon, which is like an after-school academy. Students there go to school from like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. They go home for like a little break, and they get a snack, and then they go back to these after-school academies. And
did you say 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.?
that's what I said.
Go home, have a snack, and come back?
Yeah.
That's not an academy. That's a
some high school kids.
slave labor camp.
It's rough. They're very focused on academics.
What would you say the level of English on average is in South Korea?
Level. I would say most people that have not traveled and lived in an English-speaking country can still not really communicate effectively.
What is English always taught, or are there other languages that they learn?
It's taught. They start learning.
What
English,
languages do they learn in school typically?
Korean and English.
Korean English.
Yeah.
So they don't learn Mandarin, they don't learn Japanese or anything, or
they can.
Spanish.
They
or
can.
You know?
They can
Everyone
opt
will learn
to.
Japanese.
Well,
Terrible oppressors.
well, I mean, I'm doing the naive like what's all around, you know, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean that is how they feel about Japan.
Or
even
Hindi.
Still.
They could learn Hindi.
I-
There's a billion people that
Too. Yeah, I mean, there's 2 billion people that.
Yeah, I mean most most of the students, there are some students who take Chinese, but again, it's in these hagwons, these after-school academies. So they have their public school that they usually go to, or private school if they're there, and then they have these after-school academies. And these after-school academies are like, they pay extra for them, but they pay, probably almost like a negligent amount of money per month. It might be $100 a month or something like that to go to these academies.
For 12 hours of training?
Yeah,
training.
school.
Yeah, school.
Well, because sometimes they go to different academies. Like kids will usually have like maybe an English academy one day, and a science academy another day, and a math academy another day, maybe piano or art or something like that. And the school that I went to, the Hapkido school that also taught kickboxing, they had a Hapkido academy.
Really?
Yeah.
Where are these jiu-jitsu academies?
I know, where's the jiu-jitsu academy?
Right?
What's funny is you keep saying after school, and I keep thinking, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. or
Right.
2 p.m. to 6 p.m. And this is 8 p.m. at
Right.
night to 10 p.m. at night. So when do you sleep? There is no time for
When
sleep.
do they see the parents?
Yeah.
The enemy is sleep, Chris. The enemy is sleep.
They typically they'll go to school until 3 or 4 p.m. They'll come home, they'll have a snack, then they go to their hagwon for a few hours, then they come home, they eat dinner, they do their homework, they go to bed, and then they start all over.
Dude, it's a full-time job.
What happens on the weekends?
I
Is it a
think
6-day?
I think that's the time they usually get a little bit of a break. I'm sure they have homework and stuff, but that's when they usually have a little bit of a break.
School is Monday through Friday.
School is Monday through Friday.
What so your journey in Korea, it was how long exactly?
So we were there for a year.
A year. You got a lot in the years.
Yeah.
How many fights did you have while you were there?
I only had 2 fights while I was there.
Only 2 fights?
Yeah.
It sounds like you had
Yeah.
40.
I had some good training while I was there.
What was your training schedule like? Because obviously you're very busy, right? Or did you have not excessive free time, but enough discretionary time?
I trained 1 or 2 times per day because I would arrive at work at 1 p.m. and we had like a 1 hour planning, and then we went to work from 2 to 8. So I would train sometimes in the morning. I would bike there, train in the morning, and then I would sometimes shower there, or I would bike home and then shower, and then we would go to the hagwon. We would go to the English academy, and we would be in school. We'd work for 6 hours, and then sometimes I would leave right from there and go to the kickboxing place again and train again.
What's your wife or your girlfriend at the time doing all while you're training and teaching? Like, is she
Sulking?
does she not enjoy her time in Korea?
I think I probably spent a little bit too much time training and maybe not enough time with her and exploring. But that's just, I don't know. I guess it's just my nature. I don't feel whole if I'm not training regularly. When I'm not getting it in, I feel like there's something.
So growing
missing in my
up,
life.
like you said, I heard you mention you were doing like karate and all these sort of things. Have you always been like a super active person? Where
No.
Really?
Definitely not. I really didn't become active because even, I started karate when I was like 13, 14 years old. But I was not even very disciplined then. I started training under, I started training at the Peter Claver Center in Joliet, this place where I grew up. And I wasn't very dedicated. I didn't train very often. And this was under Ozzie Mitchell, the late Ozzie Mitchell, great karate instructor.
Was this also because something like, your parents just were looking for something for you to do, or did you seek it out on your?
It was something I wanted to do. I mean, even when I was really young, I wanted to do karate.
Did you want to do karate, or did you want to fight?
I wanted to do karate because my dad did karate on and off. I mean, he was never like super high level, but he did karate on and off. So I always saw the gis hanging in the closet, and I thought it was cool. And just like anybody in our generation, I grew up playing with G.I. Joes and Ninja Turtles and, watching the related shows.
Why aren't they doing this now?
watching martial arts movies, like, I love some Jean-Claude Van Damme growing up,
This is the correct.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This
yes.
is the way. That's right. So, I always wanted to do it, but my mom was always like, oh, I don't want you to get punched in the face. I don't want them to wreck your pretty face, And I had asthma growing up, and that was a challenge. So I think she was always worried. She was always fearful of the fact that I would drop dead in the middle of a dojo or something like that. And, but finally, when I got into, I think I was just getting into high school, I started training with Ozzie Mitchell, and, I didn't go very often, and I didn't go consistently, so I didn't really progress while I was there.
I mean, you're just being a teenager too. Right?
Exactly.
Like, that's us. Yeah.
Exactly. But I ended up going to a military school, and that's when I really became active. When I went to the military school, I couldn't even run a mile without walking. And that was part of our, PFT.
How old were you at the time?
I was 16 when I went to military school.
So this is separate than something like ROTC that's in like a traditional high school.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't
military
really
school specifically. This is training you to get into the military, basically, or
not
or
so
run
much.
By the, like,
not so much. This was like a Jenny Jones boot camp type military school. I wasn't really coping well with high school, let's say. I had some issues, mostly I think were related to stress. I had a lot of stress in my life at the time, and I didn't know how to deal with the stress. And we kind of it was a time where our family really kind of lacked structure because when I was 13, my parents got divorced, and they were in separate households, not living far from each other, about a block away. And it gave us too much freedom at a time when we.
When you say us, you mean you and your siblings?
Me and my sisters,
okay.
my elder sisters. When a time when I probably really needed a lot of structure because you're going through so many chemical and hormonal changes at that age. You're very fragile, and this is the age I deal with every day because I'm a freshman English teacher. But I hated high school, and ironically, I'm at high school every day now. But I ended up going to an alternate school because, again, I wasn't coping well with the regular curriculum and social life that high school offered. And I ended up integrating my way back into the regular high school, the traditional high school, and then I ended up going back to alternate school again. And then someone came and they gave a presentation about this military school called Lincoln's Challenge Program. And it was called program at this time. It's called Academy now. It's actually a legit academy. But through it, you get your GED. You don't get a, high school diploma. It's like a 6-month program. And a lot of people end up dropping out before the end of it because it's just the rigors of military life. You wake up at 5 a.m., you do PT.
Are you living there?
Or live there. You live there.
Wow.
It was in Rantoul, Florida, so it was in South Florida. It was about 5 or 6 hours south.
So you immigrated from Illinois to Florida for this?
No. This was south. This was in South Illinois.
Illinois.
Did I say South Florida?
Yes, you did South Florida.
Like, wow,
so no.
Dedication.
I'm sorry.
Man,
it was in Southern Illinois. It was about 5 hours south of where I lived in Rantoul, Illinois, and it was. You're thrown into military life at 16, 17, or 18 years old. I think that's the cutoff is 18 years old.
And at that point, they're like, we're gonna just put you right in, right?
Yeah,
at
and
18.
A lot of the kids that were in there, they went there as an alternate to going to prison. It was like, hey, you can either go to prison or you can go through this program, and if you make it through this program in 6 months, you get out, we'll wipe away whatever, record you have.
So you didn't have a criminal record. You just
I didn't have a criminal record. No.
Oh, really? That's
no. But I mean, I had roommates that were, in gangs. When I was in the program, I had one roommate that was a vice lord, which is, it's kind of like the equivalent of a blood in Chicago area. And then I had another, roommate that was, the equivalent of a Crip in essence. So they're like rival gangs right in my room, because it was 3 in a room. But it was interesting watching how things progressed in the program because we started out with about 80 people in our group and our team, and it whittled down to about 20 or 25. So a lot of kids dropped out, even though they knew they were getting in. A lot of them, we're going to go to prison when we get out. I'll take prison over this.
Really? So they, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, it's rigorous, and it's. I think what it is more than anything too is that most of the kids there, regardless of what background you come from, you lack discipline,
Sure.
You lack structure, and now all of a sudden this is thrown upon you. And unless you're willing to assimilate, unless you're willing to, adapt to this new lifestyle, you're not going to be able to cope with the change.
So I would imagine this upbringing lent itself extremely well to your martial arts training.
It did,
Yeah,
and I got strong quick.
Oh, I bet. And at that point, you were what? Just to kind of get the timeline straight here, you were doing this. When did you go from karate to this sort of like high schooling to your kickboxing / MMA career then? Like how long? That's 4 years, right? Or is it 6 months you said?
Yeah, I mean, I got out of military school. I was still 16. I was 17. I turned 17
okay.
in military school. I was 16 when I went in. I was 17 when I got out. And then I joined the Navy. And I went in the Navy at 17 years old. Yeah.
Are you allowed to do that?
I'm sorry.
I assume you're allowed to. You did
you're
it,
allowed
right?
as long as
Parents consent.
Parents
consent.
parents
Okay, I was
consent.
like-
Parents got to sign you in.
And you got out. That's when you met with the kickboxing school.
And when I was in the Navy, I did some boxing.
Okay.
At Beachside Boxing in Virginia Beach, because that's where I was stationed. And when I got out, that's when I started training
all right.
at the MMA school.
And then to Korea, and then you got your blue belt.
And then I went to Tallahassee. I actually got my blue belt under Rob Kahn.
Did you really?
Yeah.
From Tampa.
From Tampa, because
so
he
you
came.
went from.
He came when I moved to Tallahassee. We started training at. I started training at like what was a club, more or less, of white belts and blue belts, and it was called World Vibe, and it was World Vibe Jiu-Jitsu at the time. But they wanted me to come in and teach kickboxing because none of them knew how to strike, and MMA was the big thing. You know, it was 2006.
Where was this being held? Like at a university there, or the
At
TC,
this time it was in a mall in Tallahassee. It was just we were training
somebody
out of a
rented
mall.
space, and y'all were just fight clubbing it.
We shared space with a capoeira school in Tallahassee.
This sounds so like.
Paranawe, Paranawe, Parana.
Yeah, and it was a
Oh my
really
God.
cool group of guys. You know, David Fermin kind of ran the whole thing, and he's from Venezuela, but he was a blue belt at the time, and then
Which was few and far between.
yeah,
Like
and
the-
him and his friend Roddy McGowan, they kind of started this thing, and so we all became good friends. And shortly after there, our friend Latif came in. He's now a black belt. He's now an Alliance black belt. So you know, we all started training together, and I started teaching kickboxing classes there. So we started calling
And
it.
Rob Kahn was doing.
And he would come up
Seminars or
Yeah, he would
something?
come up and do seminars and belt testings for us.
Okay, cool.
So I actually got my blue belt through him, but I would say that I was probably already blue belt level under, you know, Ron and James Hill, you know, because they probably already got me there. Even though I wasn't consistently training jiu-jitsu, I would be on the mat maybe a couple times a week, but mostly it was kickboxing through them. But
How long were you technically a white belt?
well, let's see, 2003. I think I put on my blue belt in 2007.
4 years.
And then
And then you said earlier you said 5 years of blue belt.
I think I was a blue belt all the way until Dylan gave me my purple belt.
Holy.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's why you came. I reffed your match where you put out Nathan Razzo. Remember you were like, he's out, and I was like, nah, he's supposed to fight. And you're like, he's out.
out,
I was like, oh, he's definitely out.
definitely
Like,
out.
I was reffing. He was a blue belt, and Nathan I think was an early purple or late blue, and he hit him a triangle choke, and I was like, I probably should be a better ref because I'm like I always
You
try
have the competitor telling you the guy's out, and you're like, really?
This
No,
is Longwood.
Yeah, there's that long.
Yeah, one of the house tournaments over there.
Yeah, so like I always try to give people the opportunity to fight out of things, right? But like I guess he had stopped fighting and I didn't notice. But so anyways, so yeah, you were because you came to Orlando as a blue
belt.
Yeah, like on year 4 or something at that point, right?
A 9-year blue belt.
Yeah, seven straight blue belt.
But you so Korea, traveled around all around other countries past Korea?
When we were in Korea, we did some traveling. We went to Japan. We went to China. You know, we spent some time there, just like vacationing.
But your home base was definitely Korea.
Yeah, it
Like,
was Korea. And again, our goal was to travel from country to country. But while we were there, I don't know how it happened, but my now wife got pregnant. And
I know how it happened.
Do you want to explain it to us?
Jiu-Jitsu podcast. But
It might have happened in the guard. But anyways,
so she does train.
like I said, she has to wrestle with me, so she has to deal with that. But when we were there, you know, she got pregnant, and we ended up actually having our first child in
Korea.
In Korea, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's
Noah,
awesome.
Is he a
my Noah,
Korean
my
citizen?
eldest is named Noah. He was made in Korea. I'm sorry.
Is he a Korean citizen or how does that work? Like,
We could establish Korean citizenship for him, but it would be troubling, and then he would have to drop it at 18 anyways. Because in South Korea, you have to serve 2 years in the armed forces in order to maintain. So at that point, you'd have to drop it anyways, or
Okay.
you'd have to go and serve. Which I mean, he knows nothing about the culture or the language.
yeah, like
so it
go
wouldn't be
serve the
possible.
Korean military.
Yeah, exactly. But so he was born there, and you know established U.S. citizenship. He was like 11 days old or something like that, and we traveled on a train all the way from South South Korea to the northern part to Seoul, to the U.S. Embassy. He was like 11 days old or something like that at the time, and we traveled on train with him to go ahead and establish his citizenship.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was interesting.
So you traveled a lot. Did you go to other countries after that, or did you come after teaching and whatnot in Korea? Did you come back to America?
Most of our traveling was done before then.
Oh, okay.
You know, we did some travels together, but most of our traveling was done before then because once you have kids, traveling it becomes much more difficult. But you know, after we had him there, which was awesome. I mean, great national healthcare program. I think we paid like $150 out of pocket the whole time we were there, and like they even give you like a mom card. They give you a $500 debit card.
Mom card.
Yeah, that's what they call it.
Listen to that, moms out there.
How dare they? How dare they properly take care of people who need
I know
it?
it's terrible. And I mean, and we're not even, you know, national citizens, but we have national health care because we work in South Korea. Yeah. But they give you $500 so you can travel to and from appointments, or you can buy anything for the baby on that $500 card. But we used it mostly for like taxi
like an HSA
and travel,
basically, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a couple just logistical things. The school you were working for in Korea, in South Korea, that is, was that a public or private school?
It's an academy. It's not public or private. When you say public or private, it usually applies to like what kind of school they go to during the day. This is an after school academy, so it's like an after school program, but it's an English academy. And they have all kinds of these hagwons. That's what they call them. They're called hagwons. So they have all different types. So there's English and science and math. Those are probably the most popular because they're the most prestigious. And then piano, because piano is also very
and as you said earlier, students have to pay to go, but it's nominal. It's not like an exorbitant fee to go to most of these hagwons.
Exactly. So that way they can go to the multiple hagwons, and the schools make their money in numbers. You know, if you have 300 kids enrolled and each of them is paying, you know, $100 or $150 a month, then they make their money.
So then the second question is, how did you find this position?
My wife actually did everything because I was in school. So after I decided not to go through the nursing program and I got my TEFL certification program, I transferred all my credits to FSU. And I sat down with the counselor, and I had Katie, my wife, graduated in June of 2013, and I wasn't even finished yet, but I had like 120 college credits already. I had like nearly enough for a bachelor's degree already, but none of them applied to my major because I switched majors to English because I figured, hey, if we're going to travel and teach English, I should do the thing that's going to open the most doors for me. So I decided to change to English, and I settled on an English literature degree. Even though I'm not well-versed in literature even now. But I sat down with the counselor there, and I'm like, hey, these are the credits I have. Could I graduate by the end of the summer, if possible? And she's like, look, you need a lot of upper-level literature classes. She's like, you have about 45 credits to do. And she's like, you could do 45 credit hours. On paper, you could do 45 credit hours in the spring and the summer. And she's like, but I've never seen anybody take that many college credits, and I'd be surprised if you're going to be able to complete it.
Yeah, that'd be brutal.
And so I did it.
Did you really?
I did. And it was brutal. I mean, I was taking all upper level English classes. So, you know,
all you were doing must have been writing.
All I was doing was writing and reading, air quotes. So, you know, I was in like 3 literature classes at a time.
Oh my God.
And, you know, so a lot of times I would be having to be reading 3 novels a week and writing essays on these novels. So 3 essays a week. The essays were easy for me. That's what got me through school, is because I'm a decent writer. But what I would do is I would just read excerpts of these novels and read some background information and whatever I could find on the internet and learn enough about the novel, and then take a piece of the novel and do literary critique on that section, and that was enough to impress my teachers to get a good grade. And I don't think I got lower than a B on any essay while I was in school. I think most of them were A's. But in 2 semesters, I took 45 credit hours, and it was brutal. And I couldn't have done it without Katie. You know, like I was living off of student loans mostly. We both worked at Longhorn. We were both vegetarians at the time, but we met at Longhorn Steakhouse.
Oh my God. That right there to me is the kicker of the story. 2 vegetarians working at Longhorn Steakhouse.
We met at Longhorn Steakhouse. 2 vegetarians meet at Longhorn Steakhouse.
That's like the beginning of a joke. It
really is. I use it as an example.
And this is in Tallahassee as well?
This is in Tallahassee as well.
okay.
I use this as an example of irony all the time. I'm like, oh, two vegetarians meet at a steakhouse. Like, that's perfect. That's classic irony right there. That's situational irony. And so we...
Hold up. You're going to school and taking 22 credits per semester. At this point.
semester, yeah.
You're fucking or trimester, right? Spring and summer.
Yeah.
Splitting.
It was spring, and then, summers has, it has what they called A and then B and C. And A was all summer, and then B and C was split. So what I had is I had like 3 courses that were A, and then like 2 courses in B and C. So it was like at any given time I was taking like 5 or 6
Is she
courses.
taking classes as well?
She was taking classes in the spring, and then she graduated.
Oh, okay.
She graduated in June.
And what's her degree in?
Her degree's in psychology.
Psychology. Okay.
And that was my minor. Like I said, I couldn't have done it without her because she was working more, especially once she graduated. She was working more, and she only had a few courses to do her last semester as well. So she was working more to allow me to focus on school and get through because she wanted to go. She's like, when summer's over, I'm ready to go. So over the summer, she was researching, and we were looking at China, but China wanted us to have our degree already. And I'm like, oh, I don't have my degree yet.
At the time you'd be submitting the application.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
And so they couldn't wait. They were like, you need to have your degree now. And she's like, look, my husband, or my boyfriend doesn't have his degree yet, and they're like, well, can you fake it? It's like, no, we can't really fake it. Really? Like, can you fake it? No, we can't. So then we looked into Korea, and, she found that Korea paid better. And there were more opportunities to make more in Korea. Like, Korea is actually if you're going to teach English as a foreign language, it's a very lucrative place to go because not only can you make a decent wage, teaching at a program, but there's a lot of tutoring opportunities because a lot of, they see this as a way out. They see English as a way out because English has become kind of like the language of business worldwide. So they see it as a way out for their kids. And a lot of the major universities, and there's 3 major universities, don't ask me to name them, but there's 3 major universities in Korea that all the kids in South Korea that kids try to get into. And one of the big requirements is like, what's your English language fluency? So that's a huge thing for them. So they focus heavily on that. So almost every kid is an English Hagwon in addition to learning English in their private or public school during the day. So that's what she decided on. She's like, hey, we're going to go here. And she did most of the work. I just had to, get together some paperwork and stuff.
She handled like the arrangements.
Yeah.
The application. And this was with a... directly with the Hagwon. You weren't dealing with the Korean government.
Well, actually, it was through a recruiter.
Okay.
So the recruiter recruits for the Hagwon, and then the recruiter gets a kickback from the Hagwon.
Yep. Okay.
So we did everything pretty much
interesting.
through a recruiter. But things got a little crazy after Katie got pregnant, and we kind of like kept it under wraps because there's like in our contract, it's like once you're there for 6 months, you're kind of locked in. But anytime during the first 6 months, they can terminate you.
Oh my God.
And there was already kind of like a stigma in South Korea because we were boyfriend and girlfriend living together, at an apartment that they provided, and they pay for all your expenses,
Oh, really? So they're handling room and board and your salary?
Yeah, the Hagwon provides room and board.
What about moving expenses? Did they do that?
Not moving expenses, but they pay for your flight to and from.
Dang.
Yeah, so it's a sweet deal.
It's a really good deal.
It's a sweet deal.
So for anybody out there, because this was something I was interested in doing, I don't know who would be listening to this, but do you know off the top of your head what some of the resources your then girlfriend at the time, now wife, was using to for example, find this recruiter and get the ball rolling on this?
I honestly don't think it's too hard. Like there are websites where you can go to if you want to teach English as a foreign language, and you can just search like TEFL, and you'll find websites where you can find, hundreds of places that are looking for teachers who want to teach abroad.
Okay.
So it's not hard to find. If you get some kind of certification, be it TEFL or CELTA or, there's all these different certifications. Those are the 2 big ones. Then you can find, if you have a 4-year degree, because that's usually what they require now, in anything, doesn't have to be in English, but in anything, then you can teach abroad.
I find this surprising because at the time when I was looking at things abroad, and this was in 2000, 7, things were, if you look abroad, if you look online, it was a lot of volunteer opportunities where you pay to volunteer. Yeah, I mean, that's how it kind of it was. But the 2 programs that I came across was the one I did, which was the Auxiliares program, which is the Spanish government bringing in. They brought in 2,000 at the time. It wasn't that well known, so it wasn't as competitive as I'm sure it is now. If it still exists, I don't know. And the other one that's very famous is the JET program, which is the Japanese government brings people in, and they pay very well and very handsomely.
They pay very well. But the cost of living there is really high. Yeah. That's where South Korea...
Much more so than Korea?
Much more so.
Really?
South Korea, you can get by on very little.
I'd imagine that's different.
You can save a lot of money. No.
Really?
No, you can save a lot of money there.
South Korea is now, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Absolutely.
So you so from Korea, had a kid there.
Yeah, we had a kid there. So then we decided to move back to the States. So we actually moved into...
How long was he there before you guys were like, hey, it's time to go?
Well, he was born...
Was your contract up and you're like, it's time to go
we waited for the contract. Like I said, it got a little crazy because she...
How long is the contract term for?
1 year.
1 year. And they have, for 6 months, they have the ability to fire you at any time. And after 6 months, they will honor the rest of that contract.
Yeah. So
in theory.
Yeah. So she waited until we hit our 6 month mark to really tell them that, hey, I'm pregnant.
What is I mean, like, when I hear boyfriend and girlfriend living together, blah, 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 and you said there's like a stigma attached. To me, I would think like that's almost... You're less likely to go out and do stupid, crazy things because you're an adult at that point. Right. So, like, I would think that's more of an advantage, but maybe that's just my weird Western thinking. I don't know. Like,
yeah,
but I mean, pregnancy, obviously, that kind of
that complicates things. Yeah. I think after us, she even said to us, like, I'm never hiring a boyfriend and girlfriend again. And I think she even went as far as to say, like,
why was she so disappointed though? Like, I don't see how is this getting in the.
Well, now they're on the dole, right? Like their medical care system's taking care of non-citizen, I mean, like maybe that's why. Or?
It's more so because there's a maternity leave program in Korea that we took advantage of, and we said, hey, we're not national citizens, but according to the program, it doesn't matter. Right. According to your government, it doesn't matter whether you're citizens or not. Katie's entitled to maternity leave, so. She took maternity leave.
So I mean, the whole thing. They take care of people who are not.
Yes, exactly. But they didn't want to because they're Hagwon. If we were at a public school or a private school, like one of the day schools, it wouldn't have been an issue. But the Hagwons, they do some sketchy things. Like, for example, we were both supposed to be teaching at this school, but the numbers started to dwindle while we were there. So they ended up sending me to another school in a neighboring city. And Katie was still teaching at this academy, which was called EIE at the time. And they sent me to another academy, which is called Pokjong, which was it was super easy. Everything was made for me, so I didn't have to do any of the lesson plans. Great school, really cool school to work at, and I'm glad I got that experience. But they sent me there.
Are they under the same like holding company or something?
No,
so they were able to transition
no. So technically, they're not supposed to do that because according to my visa, I'm supposed to work at the school that I was hired at. So they were definitely there's probably something shady going on. Like Pokjong probably paid her the recruitment fee in order to send me over there. Okay, and she probably made some money there. So what we kind of, so when Katie was like, hey, I'm actually 5 or 6 months pregnant and I'm gonna be going on maternity leave soon. It was like total chaos for a while. And the administrator of the program, who was like the CEO, so to say, of this Hagwon, she flipped out. And she's like old school, like. Korea, like farmhand Korea, like, she's like works around the clock, teaches around the clock, and is like, can't believe like, why would you want to take maternity leave? Like have the baby, give the baby to someone and then get back to work, because that's how it was, it was like, you're working in the
handoff, bro.
Yeah, exactly. So, she's like, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to get an English teacher if you go on leave? And I was like, look, you sent me to another school. Just bring me back. I'm still under contract here, technically. Just bring me back from the other school and let them figure it out. And we kind of...
Right, because you're not in contract with them. So that's their
exactly. Huh. And I did kind of all... Katie is non-confrontational when it comes to this kind of stuff. So I did all the talking. I kind of navigated our way through the conflict and made it so I would come back to EIE for the last 3 months. And, I arranged it so she would still be under the National Healthcare Program, so that everything would still be taken care of for the baby, but she no longer collected pay at that time. They were like, look, if she's not teaching, she's not getting paid. So I got paid still. She had money saved away anyway, so we were good. And the National Healthcare still covered both of us, and they had to still pay for us to get flown home, because that was one of the things. If the contract got broken midway through, then you had to find your own flight home.
That's like
that's
like $2,000, right?
Right.
Like, fuck that.
So I had to navigate through that conflict, and that's what happened. So we ended up flying back to South Florida. Katie was raised in Coral Springs, Florida.
Is she really?
Yeah.
What year did she graduate?
She graduated from Taravella in 2009.
Okay, that's 2009.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where are you from?
I'm not from. I've like one of my best friends is from Coral Springs.
Okay.
So like
You were going to do that thing again.
I was going to think, but hey, if they graduate in the same class, there's a high likelihood that they would know each other.
Right.
But either way.
So we moved back. We ended up living with their parents for a couple of years while we were down there, because they had extra space. Most of the kids were out then. So we moved in with Noah, and it was perfect for Noah, because Noah got to, for the first couple years of his life.
Grandparents, like,
he got to raise with his grandparents.
And you guys had free babysitters.
Free babysitters, and they loved it. And I wouldn't say that grandparents are always the best babysitters, but they still.
No. But you know what they are?
Yeah, free. That's true. That's true.
I totally get that.
And they love them more than a babysitter could, So the first thing I did is I looked up Longhorn, the closest one, which was in Davie, and I was like, hey, I need a job here. And her father actually got her the job at Longhorn.
Okay.
Because he was a GM at the time. So he got me a job at the Longhorn in Davie, and I went back to work right away as soon as I got back, because the cool thing about serving is it's a trade, If you serve at one place, you can serve anywhere. And because I'd already served at Longhorn and hadn't changed that much in a year, so I went back to serving tables again, and then I ended up teaching at Taravella High School, the high school that she graduated from, which, there's a whole other story behind that. But I ended up teaching there.
Teaching English?
I was actually teaching reading. So I was dealing with like the bottom 25 percentile. So I learned a lot about classroom management teaching reading at Taravella High School.
Holy cow.
I would imagine you saw a vast difference in classroom behavior between Korea and American teenagers.
Yeah. I mean, there were classes. I mean, the classroom size in South Korea, the biggest class I had was like 10.
Oh my God.
And the smallest class I had was like 2. Okay. Whereas now I'm dealing with, classes that are above cap size. Cap size was at 25 for reading classes, but I had classes that were like 31 and like 7th period, end of the day, bottom 25 percentile. And when you're dealing with reading students, it's not always the case, but often you get one of two things. You get kids who do poor academically, so they use their behavior to cover up the fact that they do poor academically. So they act out so people don't see the fact that they do poorly academically. Or you have kids that have really bad behavior problems, and so they don't do well academically. Even though they're smart enough to do well, they don't have the discipline to do so. So either way, you're dealing with a lot of discipline problems all day.
So I've been dying to ask this from when you said you currently teach in high school. In all your teaching years, have you ever had to use your martial arts skills in the classroom?
No. I would say no.
What a story.
I would say no physically, but I would say that because I do train and because the kids were always aware of it, I think I have a certain presence in the classroom.
So you command a certain level of respect.
So there was an awareness.
Exactly.
Okay, so it was a deterrent.
Even now the kids have, I think, for one, because I develop good relationships with them, they have such a high level of respect for me.
You're not in a reading class now, though, right?
No, now I'm an English teacher at Winter Park High School.
Which is a great high school.
Yeah, it's a great high school. I mean, you still have you have the haves and the have-nots. You don't really have like a...
Of course, yeah. It's Winter Park, so it's like... They have blue street signs. Everybody else has green. They're that special.
But...
It's true.
But you have both, you have kids that are from the lower class, and then you have kids that get dropped off in Maseratis, So it's like you have all different levels. You have the kids that walk to school from, like heritage homes, and then you have the kids that, their dad drops them off every day in a Porsche. Right. So it's like you have this huge, discrepancy between the high and the lows. But I like that too. I like that I get to deal with all different types of kids. And I like the curriculum I teach. I love the school I'm at. I'm at the 9th grade center at Winter Park.
How did you end up at Winter Park? Because you went from a South Florida school, right? And then you went straight from South Florida. That's when you came up here, and we actually met you up here.
Yeah. I mean, actually, indirectly, I owe a lot to my wife, and I guess it works out that way, that she's been such a, amazing figure in my life. But, I got the job at Taravella because her mom was friends with the principal, and because even Katie was friends with the principal, and I was looking to be a substitute teacher until I found something else. Okay. And this reading position opened up, and he's like, hey, I've got 2 positions open, reading and biology, which one do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I'm an English teacher. I guess reading would be better. In hindsight, biology probably would have been better, but it was a good experience for me. And I ended up teaching reading there for a year and a half and coaching wrestling while I was there as well. So that was kind of cool.
Coaching wrestling. So you kickbox, you done sanda, done crazy judo, karate, boxing,
sambo,
all these things. What got you? Was that just you're like, hey, you know what? I need to learn wrestling?
Yeah, it was more like I don't know wrestling. So when my first year there was a half year, and there was already a head coach and an assistant coach, and I said, hey, can I volunteer and just help out with you guys? Like, I do martial arts. The conditioning is the same, but the grappling is very different. Like the way you guys grapple is very different than what I'm used to, because I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. I'm not a wrestler. And they were like, sure, you can help out. So
Were they familiar with jiu-jitsu?
They knew what it was.
Okay.
Yeah, they knew what it was. I mean, they didn't train, but they knew what it was. But I coached there with them as a volunteer for a half a year, and then at the end of the year, without much notice, the head coach was like, I'm resigning and I'm moving. And everybody was like, well, what are we going to do? And I was the only one of the 3 who actually taught there. The other one was the one that resigned actually was a PE coach, and then he left. And then the assistant coach, he worked elsewhere, and he was still in college. So they really wanted someone, for head coach, they want someone who works at the school, because then
that's required, right? Like,
not always. No,
is it not?
No, you can be an outside. You can be an outside staff member, or you can be outside. You can work outside.
It's like you have to teach like driver's ed or some bullshit, like life skills or some nonsense.
You can get certified to coach. Okay. You can get certified to coach, but it's just difficult because it's hard to communicate.
That's not a full-time pay situation.
It's not. Okay. I mean, it's supplement, and it's very low supplement. I mean, it's really volunteer work because you get paid pennies per hour that you put in. So, shout out to all the coaches out there because they put a lot of work in for nothing.
Because, I mean, it's truly a labor of love at that point.
So what I ended up being a head coach the following year because no one stepped up.
With a year and a half of wrestling coaching experience.
A half a year.
Oh my God.
A half a year. And I told them, there was the athletic director all summer was like, hey, are you going to coach for us? You're going to coach for us? I'm like, look, if you can find somebody else who knows how to wrestle and knows how to be a wrestling coach, put them in. If you can't find anybody, then I'll step up and I'll do it. But I don't think he really looked. I think he knew since I was going to step in.
Was the wrestling program like pretty successful there? Or
no, it wasn't a really big program. Okay. We had kids that were regional placers, but we never had any state placers or anything like that at the time. I think they've stepped it up quite a bit. The assistant to the then head coach and my assistant, Joey St. Germain, he's really stepped up the program. I'm watching him on social media, and he's got I think he had 8 kids go to regionals this year, and I think one of them is probably going to be a state placer this year. So I think they're doing really well. They're stepping up the program. But then when I moved up here, I coached here for a couple years as well, and I took on the assistant position because there was.
This is at Winter Park?
Winter Park.
Okay, cool.
Because again, I came in and I was like, hey, I'll be your third, because they allow 3 supplemental positions up here. I'll be your third supplemental position, and I'll help out the head coach. And then 2 weeks into the beginning of the school year, the head coach left and ended up going to Bishop Moore. And they were like, what are you guys going to do? And so the assistant ended up stepping up to head coach, and I took the assistant position. So we coached together for a couple years.
Awesome. How much do you feel as though, okay, so you're an English teacher, or excuse me, yeah, truly an English teacher, a reading teacher, a literature, or what were you teaching? Oh yeah, you were a reading teacher. Learning wrestling, how much of all of that did you find lent itself to you becoming a head coach, and effective head coach, I would assume? I mean,
I think a lot of aspects are the same. So, developing a positive relationship with the students, or the student athletes in this case, learning how to design a curriculum helps you to kind of develop practice plans, and establishing a respectful relationship where they respect you enough to listen to you. But again, I'm not a wrestler, so that was always the challenge for me. It's like anytime we went down to the mat, like, now you're in my wheelhouse, and I learned those techniques really quickly. But even, any kind of like, takedowns and takedown defense, that was always like new to me. Cause like, we're like, hey, let's just pull guard,
So were you, okay, just out of curiosity, then, were you the head coach originally? Did they have more of like a certain style of wrestling they were teaching the students? Then once you sort of by default became the instructor there, were you like, all right, so we're gonna do more sort of like Niwaza type, like leg riders and that sort of thing? I don't even know terminology. I don't wrestle.
Yeah.
So
by virtue of the fact that I had so much martial arts experience coming in that 6 months that I worked with the head coach, I learned a lot.
Okay.
I learned enough to teach them some really basic stuff. So I was able to kind of like share what I learned with the wrestlers. But plus there were some wrestlers who had been wrestling for a long time. We had one wrestler in particular who had been wrestling for 7 years at the time, and he was his senior year. So I had some of the wrestlers who had been wrestling for a long time.
Cool.
They would teach techniques as well, and I would run all the
I bet you that lends a
conditioning
lot to the overall training environment too. I mean, just because it's like, it shows more buy-in from the actual athletes.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Especially because they can see how they've progressed. They've seen how these wrestlers have been training for a long time. They've progressed. But we had a lot of fresh wrestlers come out that year, the year that I was head coach, and it was like, crazy to see, how much they grew in just a year. We had one or two guys who, they were first year wrestlers make it to regionals,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was mostly just on heart, just like, just fighting hard, it wasn't even so much through technique, but just like fighting hard in their matches and never giving up.
Are you fighting also during all this, or had you got your fighting chops out of the way?
I was still training. I was training at Sunrise, American Top Team in Sunrise, under Roger Crawl.
Oh, okay.
As a striking coach, and under Felipe Laborio, under. Yeah.
Okay,
so he did the gi classes, and then Mark Stevens did no gi for a while, and Ben Stark did no gi for a while. So I trained with them in no gi.
The Hebrew Hammer.
But because I got to meet Felipe Laborio, he hooked me up with Kyle Lesher, who teaches over at Edgewater, and started the Edgewater program over there, the Edgewater Jiu-Jitsu program.
So that's how you were involved. Okay, because
that's how I got linked up with him and Ricardo Laborio. Yeah. And I've gotten to rub elbows with Ricardo Laborio and get to know him. And, I'm not as good of friends with him as Kyle Lesher is. They're really tight. But I've gotten to know Ricardo, and it's been really cool, man. He's like an amazing person. And, he's a person, when you watch him, you're like, I don't know how anybody does as much as he does, because he is so busy. He's so busy, and he's always so active in the jiu-jitsu community worldwide, constantly on a flight somewhere,
traveling.
Just an amazing
he's probably the best ambassador that we could have. Man, like we're fortunate to have him as our ambassador.
Super positive
for ATT, especially. Well, not ATT anymore, Martial Arts Nation. Excuse me.
Yeah,
but just for jiu-jitsu in general, right? Like, because he seems to be the guy who's gonna take us to the Olympics and get into college and that sort of thing. So you were. So I followed you on social media for a while just because we became friends.
Yeah.
By way of just acquaintances. You were training with Kyle in the mornings, right? Like that sort of club /
We did that for a while, but that was after we first started meeting up. There was a old wrestling room that he started the Edgewater Jiu-Jitsu program in, him
Jiu-Jitsu
and Ricardo.
Club or Jiu-Jitsu class? Like a credit earning class?
It was kind of like a club.
Okay.
Even still, it's a kind of a club. It's not really a class because they don't take it during the day. But it was this red room, this old wrestling room that it started in. And, he would have people usually meet like on Sundays or after school a couple times a week. And it was very informal then.
You're a blue belt right now, right?
I was a blue belt.
You're a blue belt, okay.
Yeah. And, then they transformed it and they got their own space at Edgewater now. And they got like a legit dojo. Like it's great, like fully matted out. And,
And that's Edgewater Jiu-Jitsu?
That's Edgewater Jiu-Jitsu. Okay. And they're doing great things now.
Who's teaching that right now?
I'm sorry?
Who's teaching that right now?
Kyle Lesher and Julie Lesher, his wife, are kind of in charge of the program.
Okay.
And of course they're, the black belt over the program is Ricardo Laborio. Marcio Pimentel is also a black belt over the program, and he teaches some kids classes as well after school. It's like they kind of have like a high school program that's after school where it's an after school club and you can show up and you can train, and sometimes they do gi and sometimes they do no gi, and then after that they have a kids class for like younger kids that Marcio teaches, and he's a super high level judo guy and a jiu-jitsu
He's the
black
guy
belt
who's
as well.
teaching over at
Edgewater.
East Orlando now too, right?
Is he over there as well, Marcio?
No, I'm asking you.
Oh yeah, he's teaching judo over there as well. Right?
Okay, all right.
Okay, yes. I've seen him on the social medias.
media, right? So you got involved there, coaching wrestling, man. So my question to you is, and just dad talking to dad now. I have one kid,
Yeah.
and so you were able to. I saw you up, busting your ass, running in the mornings, doing 6 a.m. jiu-jitsu after that. Like you're a sponsored athlete from Alpha Authentics, right?
That's right.
And Dave Moss, Toyota.
Now Seminole Toyota.
Now Seminole Toyota, right? Like you.
I work down the weekends. I work on Saturday and Sunday because when I first
In addition to teaching,
I typically work 6 or 7 days a week.
Jesus Christ, and training.
And I train a couple days a week, but most of my training is in the morning. I get it in the morning because I don't have time in the afternoon.
No, yeah.
I'm gone usually 10 to 12 hours a day every day. So when I get home, I have 4 to 6 hours to be at home and to be with my family.
And to be your dad, right?
Before it's bedtime.
Dad and husband, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, most of my evenings now are dedicated to that. When I had my third child, she was due November 8th, and that was right at the beginning of wrestling season. So after
Holy
2
shit,
years,
you're teaching, you're coaching.
Yeah, after 2 years of coaching at Winter Park, I knew that since we were due in November, that was the time that I had to resign.
Okay,
so I resigned from coaching then.
And just to clarify, when you said David Mouse, you're working as a car salesman up there? Or are you
my
doing something else?
My first summer there was after my first year at Winter Park, and I was like, let me try this out for summer. I want to try out my hand in sales because I used to sell vacuum cleaners. I used to sell $1,800 vacuum cleaners no, Kirby.
Okay. Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right.
So the other one. Yeah.
Bowling ball, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that was always fun because I used to sell these, $1,800 vacuum cleaners to people in like Section 8 houses who were getting welfare checks. So that was a lot of fun. But I did that for a while and I gained that experience. And then I was a marketing director at a small nursing agency. So I had some sales experience and I was like, you know what? I'm good with my words. I'm a good speaker. I'm used to being in front of people. I'm good with people. I'm cute. So let me try my hand in sales because, maybe I can draw people and I can make good money this way. And I found over that summer that I could probably do that. It would probably be a very lucrative career for me in sales, even car sales. But it was like 9 to 9 every day.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted to make your units and that's how you make your money, you're there all the time.
So were you on the line outside, or were you inside
I was actually in
making
internet.
calls?
I was in internet sales.
Okay,
I would do calls and then I would set up appointments.
Gotcha.
And a couple hours a day I would sit out on the when I knew it was busy time, I would sit out and try to do fresh ups, sit out on the lot and see if people came out.
So that was your side hustle.
That was my side hustle during the summer, and I was like, let me try to do this over the summer and see if this could be a better career for me than teaching, because teaching obviously is not very lucrative. I love being in the classroom. I love meeting 150 young people every year and developing relationships with them, but it's hard to support a family on that. It's a challenge.
When does Cogito come into this and train with Dylan?
Actually,
and getting your purple belt and
I was
yeah.
I was recommended to Cogito Jiu-Jitsu by Mitchell Chamale, because Mitchell trained with us when we were at World Vibe in Tallahassee. Mitchell,
really?
Yeah, Mitchell had
Have
some
you fought for him at all in his promotions?
I don't think I've ever fought on Combat Night, honestly.
Really?
I don't think I ever have.
When was your last
quite
fight?
a few of his shows. Grappling match or non-grappling?
So this is the semantics, right? Like we get into this discussion every so often. It's like, do you call a jiu-jitsu match a fight?
Yeah.
I don't. Dude, Noah?
I don't either. I think it's a different level of anxiety.
Let's just say it's a match.
It's a match.
It's a match.
But when was your... I know you compete on the regular in jiu-jitsu. When was your last
full contact
competition where striking is involved? And what made you stop?
I think Korea.
Oh, really?
I think Korea. And what made me stop? I think my kids more than anything.
Was it because you don't want to You want to actually be able to talk to them and teach them English?
Now that I understand the science of traumatic brain injury better than I used to, when I was first getting into it, I don't think the science was really out there for traumatic brain injury. We knew what punch drunk meant,
right?
And we understood that, but we didn't know how it happened. But now that we understand, what it means to take repetitive subconcussive and concussive hits over and over again, and how much damage that does to the brain, like duh.
So you're responsible.
Now that I'm responsible for 3 young lives.
4. I mean, your wife, I assume, is a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah, she survived without me, though, so she could probably survive without me again.
And you've survived without her. I've seen on a couple weekends here and there.
But the kids, no, they need us right now. They are dependent. I don't consider my wife a dependent because she can survive without me. In fact, I'm probably more dependent on her than she's on me. So, now that I understand that, I just can't do it anymore. There's still a desire. Sometimes I still get the itch, especially when I watch fights, especially when I see, even in like super high level fights, and I see people and I'm like, I see some techniques sometimes that is questionable, and I'm like, man, I know where I'm at now, and I see where they're at, and sometimes I'm like, man, it's like this is still something that I could have done,
Right.
But now I'm nearing 37. I love jiu-jitsu. I don't have to get punched in the face. And, again, there's a different level of anxiety at that type of competition. Even if I'm doing a single fight, a super fight, and it's going to be in a cage and everybody's watching me, it's like worst case scenario, I just tap my opponent and I'm done and we're out of here. It's not like where you don't see a shot coming and you get knocked out and you wake up looking at the lights.
Have you ever had that happen?
Man, great story. One time I got knocked out. This was 2004. I was up against a guy named Tom Grimmer. He was 9-0 at the time. And he trained under Duke Rufus in Milwaukee.
Did he really?
Yeah. And I had like 11 fights at the time. I think I was...
You had 11 fights? So you started training in 2003 and you had 11 fights by 2004?
Yeah, I think I was 9-2 at the time. We went hard because we had like tournaments that we were in as well. So I had multiple fights.
So fighting was your training also, basically, at that point?
Exactly. It was like train, fight. Train, fight, So I go into this fight, and Tom Grimmer had just won the IKF championship in Florida.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he had just won that. But I went in this fight pretty cocky because I was 11-2. I was just coming off of like 2 victories. I felt really strong. Both of my losses were like by decision, and they were questionable decisions. And I'm young, and I'm cocky, and I think I was 19 years old at the time. And I see Tom Grimmer, and he comes in a weigh-ins, and he just looks like this nerdy kid. He looks like nothing to me, and he's super polite and super nice guy, very unassuming. And we shake hands, we weigh in, and the next day I show up, and we stepped in the ring. There was a different monster standing across from me. Just looking at his eyes, I was like, this is not the same guy that was at weigh-ins. And so the first round we come out, and we're banging, and I realize like my hands are better than his. So I'm like trying to close the distance, and every time I close the distance, he clinches. He's beating me with like, conventional Muay Thai. So every time I close the distance and I'm using my hands, he clinches and dominates with knees. When I'm on the outside, he's dominating with kicks.
Is this an IKF fight?
It's a Muay Thai fight.
Muay Thai, okay.
It's a Muay Thai fight.
So like unlimited knees, you could
unlimited knees. As long as you're clinching and throwing knees, they won't break you up. So I always had to fight out of the clinch, and by the time I got out of the third round, my rib was already bruised. He had hit me with a knee that like crushed one of my ribs, and it was bruised. Felt like it was broken. If you've ever had a bruised rib before, you know what it's like. It's brutal.
I had one last year. It sucked.
You can't even breathe, right?
Yeah, it sucked.
So I'm in the first round. We make it out of the first round. We're in the second round, and we're kind of going back and forth. And I'm starting to figure him out, but he's starting to figure me out too. And, he's got Duke Rufus's corner. I got good corners too, but he's got Duke Rufus in his corner. And so Duke is watching me the whole second round and taking notes. And when he comes out the third round, I think he already had a plan. I think Duke probably saw that I'm dropping my right hand to guard my rib because my rib was, hurting then, And so in the third round, probably about midway through, he hits me with the switch kick, and my hand is low, and his shin comes right across my temple, and I go down. And
are you guys wearing shin pads?
We're wearing shin guards.
Shin guards, headgear. It's still terrible, though.
But it doesn't matter. That stuff, it keeps you from getting cut, but it doesn't absorb that much impact.
No, I mean, like...
So I get hit right across the temple, and I go down, and I'm out. And we were the main event. We were the main event on this card. So I guess I get up. I guess I got up, and I walked out of the ring, and we're sitting down. I don't even remember this. Okay, I don't remember getting out of the ring. I don't remember anything that happened. I remember sitting down in the chair, and all of a sudden I look up and I look around, and all the lights are on, and they're wrapping up the chairs, and all the people are gone. And I look down at my coach who's taking off one of my shin guards, and I look around, and I look up again, and I look down at him again. I go, I got knocked out. And he goes, yes, you did.
Oh, my God. Do you know how much time had passed between?
It had to be at least 5 minutes before I really, like the lights were on, but nobody was home. Right. So I don't know what happened in between there. I wish they let the camera roll just a little bit longer to see how I behaved when I was out, because I guess I was on the mat for maybe 30 seconds.
Jesus
and then they stood me back up, and I walked out of the ring and everything, but I don't know who was controlling my body, because it wasn't me. It wasn't the conscious, aware me.
Did you seek proper medical attention after that?
We went to the ER afterwards, which cost me a pretty penny, because I don't think I had insurance at the time. So it was like $1,000 ride in
this is not
ambulance.
covered by. Oh, it's an amateur fight.
It's an amateur fight. Yeah, so it's not covered. And they did an X-ray on my ribs. They did a CAT scan on my head. They said, They said I didn't sustain any injuries to either place. My rib wasn't broken.
I don't know about that, but
they said there was no, at the time, this is 2004. They said no signs of concussion. Now they say if you're knocked out, you're concussed.
They
treat concussion totally differently now than they did, 15 years ago. Well, 16 years ago now, right? So I'll never forget that. It was unforgettable, and it made me look differently, especially then. Like, I think it changed. I think something in me changed then, because I remember after my second knockout, after I knocked somebody out for the second time, and seeing him afterwards and shaking his hand afterwards and realizing he was a different person after I knocked him down. After I knocked him out and he got up from that, it was like I was talking to an empty shell. My first knockout, my first major knockout where I knocked somebody out and they went down, it wasn't like that. But this guy, he was a different person. Like I talked to him like, hey, you going to the after party? And his response was just really odd, and I was like, wow, like there's something not, everything is not, the synapses are not firing,
Right.
I realized that, and I was like, whoa. And then after I got knocked out, I was like, well, this is what happens to somebody after they get concussed like that. So it changed ever since then. I don't think I ever fought the same. It was like there was always a part of me that wasn't there anymore. Like I lost that fire,
Oh my God, that sounds terrible.
Well, I'm going to stick to grappling.
I always tell people, like, there's a reason why I stopped doing Muay Thai is just because, like, I'm getting older. At the time I didn't have Connor, but, like, if I were to ever have kids, I'm like, I see the long-term effects of it now. So I'm like, I'll hit pads. It's fine. I'll do more jiu-jitsu. So after you continue to train after having Noah.
Yeah.
You now have 2 more children.
Yeah, we have Kai and Addison now.
What keeps you training? Because, a lot of people would use that, honestly, you see it happen a lot. Like, a lot of parents use having children to, not as an excuse, but as a reason to stop doing the things that they love. And obviously, you love martial arts and you love training. What gives you that fire to wake up super early and to run 3 miles and to lift weights and to do jiu-jitsu?
I think it's my therapy, Chris. Like, when I don't get it in, any day that I don't get it in, like, I feel off the whole day. I feel off mentally, but even physically. It's like, I was telling one of my coworkers this the other day, it's like, if I go a couple days without training, I'm like, oh, I feel fat. I feel old and out of shape. And then I work out, even if it's just lifting weights. I'm like, oh, I feel great.
You're lifting at Cogito too, right? You're lifting at Cogito now.
Actually, I'm doing. I was doing some weightlifting with Dylan. He kind of got the ball rolling.
Okay.
I started doing some just calisthenic training in my backyard when I decided to like put on some strength. I had a coworker who's like a CrossFitter, and she was like, "Oh, come train with me." I'm like, all right, I need to get in shape, So
you did no supplemental weight training and conditioning?
I never had like a regular strength training program, Chris. Like for my whole life, even I had some calisthenics, especially because of the military. So I did push-ups and crunches, but even like pull-ups, I never did pull-ups regularly.
Really?
Yeah, until about a year ago. Until really about like May of last year.
Oh my God.
And all of a sudden I just started training hard, and it was in my backyard, like doing pull-ups on my kid's swing set and doing, wall push-ups and push-ups. And, I would do like what I call let me ups, which are basically like hanging deadlifts from my kids' monkey bars, and just like different calisthenic workouts. And eating more, like increasing the amount of calories I consume.
You love your omelets.
I do love my omelets. And taking protein, and creatine. And
So you're a lacto-avo vegetarian?
I am now no longer a vegetarian.
Okay.
I started eating meat about a year and a half ago.
When was the last time you ate meat prior to that?
A decade. I was a vegetarian for about a decade.
Moral or health?
It was ethical, which I still have some conflicts with, because it's like those things haven't changed.
Yeah.
Those things still exist. But I got to a place where I'm like, I'm already living with so many self-imposed limitations. Why limit myself anymore? This is a part of the world. It's a part of our culture. It's a part of the world that I can experience. And I was in Korea, where barbecue is really big, and I never ate meat while I was there.
You didn't eat any Korean barbecue over there?
I didn't eat Korean barbecue.
Oh my God.
I was a vegetarian over there. And I've been to countries where it's like, part of their culture is consuming meat. And yeah, I understand there's ethical problems with that, and probably even less in certain countries, because they do it far more ethically than we do.
I would say less over there, probably.
In some places.
I don't think...
There's not like the crazy agribusiness over there.
In some places.
Here,
Let's not...
It's like, I would say... I think, let's put it this way. I think there are fewer examples of animals being harvested in South Korea than in the United States.
Well, let's not forget that South Korea is the nation of dog markets. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's definitely, when we, Americans, is we love our dogs.
So you were there.
I was there.
That's a stereotype.
That's not a stereotype. That's a thing.
It is a thing.
It's a thing.
I mean, and it's like, it's hard for us to say.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their culture, man. Like, it's,
Yeah, exactly.
I get it.
Hey, man, it's free range.
No, I guess so. So you started eating meat again.
I started eating
Did
meat
you
again.
notice any not immediate, but at least
I think everything that I've accomplished while eating
marginal.
meat, I could have accomplished as a vegetarian.
Okay.
I think most of the weight gains that I've put on,
It's probably
is just calorie increase.
Yeah.
I went from eating, 2,000 or 3,000 calories a day to eating 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day.
5 or 6. Come on, man.
Yeah, it was a challenge at first.
So you're outworking a bad diet, like.
Yeah.
Wait, how many meals are you having a day?
Well, here's the thing: is like for a couple years, maybe a year and a half, I was intermittent fasting, so I wasn't eating until noon.
Oh,
every
here
day.
we go.
I was eating like noon to 8 every day. But now I eat whenever I want to. And I try to eat a breakfast every morning, even if it's just what I try to get in is like 5 or 6 meals a day, quote meals a day, and a meal to me is something that has 25 to 30 grams of protein, because it usually has enough leucine to trigger muscle protein synthesis. So that's my goal is every 3 hours.
You're all about keeping a positive nitrogen balance.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
And trying to stimulate muscle growth. So every 3 hours pretty much from the time I wake up until anywhere from 6 or 9 p.m. is usually my last.
Do you
meal
have
at
any
6 or 9
like meal
p.m.
replacement shakes? Or are there any shakes or
No.
used as okay?
No, I use whatever protein's the cheapest. Whatever protein's the cheapest but has enough leucine in it to trigger.
And when you
muscle
say protein,
synthesis.
you mean an actual food
I
product?
use like a protein powder.
Oh, you do?
I make
It's
so
hard to consume as much.
I make
via-
shakes, and I eat a lot of eggs, like a stupid amount of eggs, to the point where my wife yells at me and is like,
do you eat the?
"We just bought eggs like 2 days ago."
Do
And
you,
it's like,
do you
yeah,
eat any yolks?
I eat all the yolks.
You eat all the yolks.
Yeah, I don't care
Okay.
about the cholesterol. I'm not concerned
You
with
need
that.
it for the team, man. Right?
That's right. I'm not.
And we're at that age. We
Yeah.
drop 2% a year, so
Yeah.
you need that cholesterol.
Yeah, I'm not concerned with the cholesterol.
Okay.
I don't think I haven't seen that my dietary cholesterol has significantly affected my blood cholesterol.
I
because-
feel like the new enemy now is refined sugar, because that's what's causing cholesterol to actually stick to the interior of your.
Yeah. Well, since I started weight training, I'm really not doing much cardio anymore. So, those days when I was waking up and doing 3 miles every
You're
morning.
Vibram running too, right? Yeah.
Now I'm not doing that anymore. Now
barefoot
I'm
running.
Yeah, now I'm waking up and I'm just hitting the weights usually, or doing some kind of
Are
calisthenic
you
workout.
eating
but most of the
before or
time hitting
after
weights.
that? Are you doing fasted weight
I
training?
usually wake up and I'll have a protein shake, or I'll have 5 eggs. Usually soft boiled in the morning. And it's not.
This is so mind you, anybody who's not in Florida, high school here starts at 7:15.
Yeah, I leave the house. I've been leaving the house now at about 4:30 to 5 o'clock a.m.
How many hours of sleep do you get on average?
I try to get 6 to 8. You know.
Really?
Yeah, I usually get 7 or 8 hours of sleep because I'll put the boys to bed and I usually fall asleep with them. You know, if I put either I do Addie, you know, I'll put Addie to bed, or I put the boys together because they go to bed as a pair, and then Addie sleeps in her crib. So me and my wife kind of alternate. But either way, usually when I lay down next to Noah, which is usually at like 7:30, 8 o'clock, I pass out with him, and sometimes before him probably. And then he probably just passes out of boredom because he's like, Dad's already asleep, so I'm going to sleep too.
Interesting.
Yeah. So then I wake up at about 4 a.m., sometimes 4:30, depending if I'm going to go to the gym or not.
And by gym, you mean you're going to Cogito to lift there, right?
No, I actually started going to the fitness center at my school because I was like, hey, there's this gym here that's underutilized by me. I'm not using it in the morning, and it's got everything I need. And they have showers there. Like I shower in the boys' locker room, you know, but it's like no one's in the locker room at that time of the day anyway.
Sure.
So I got the locker room to myself. So I wake up, you know, I hit the gym. I try to be there at 6 a.m. so that I can train from 6 to 6:45, hit the shower, and then I'm in class by 7:05.
So how often are you training jiu-jitsu nowadays?
Only about 2 or 3 days a week.
Ah.
Usually I train.
That's dad life.
Yeah. Usually I train on Saturday and Sunday. It's usually open mat. I don't make it to any classes. I get to talk over techniques with Derek if I'm lucky on Saturdays, or Jose on Saturdays. And you know, Sunday, of course, is, you know, the Matt Furiola, you know, monster, you know, marathon rolling.
So just circling back to your exposure to Cogito by way of Mitch. You trained at a couple different places here in Orlando, right? Like what drew you to Cogito?
Actually, you know, the first place I trained at was in, you know, Mitchell's, you know, garage, I guess you say. I think he calls it the guillotine factory. He's got like a red room in back of his house that he converted. It was like, I think it was a garage, and he converted it into like a little gym. And that was the very first place I trained at. I came here in the summer of 2016, I think it was. Yeah. And my wife was actually living with my sister on the West Coast at the time because I was kind of establishing our life over here in Central Florida.
When did you guys get married?
I'm sorry?
When did you guys get married?
We got married in 2016.
2016, okay.
Yeah. And I went and trained with Mitchell because I knew Mitchell and I knew he was here, and I looked him up and I said, hey, you know, I'd like to get some training in over the summer. Can I train with you? So I met up with him and Troy Worthen, and it was the three of us. You know, I think Troy was a blue belt at the time, and just monster wrestler, freaking, you know, state placer 2 times, I think, just monster out of a small school. And the three of us were just rolling, and he was like, hey, you should go check out Cogito. I think that would be a good place for you. And, you know, ever since then, I've been training at Cogito.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I bounced
around
to
never
a few
trained
schools.
I thought you were training at East Orlando for a little bit.
I would go down there. I would go down there and train with Tarsus when Tarsus was teaching gi there. So I would go down there sometimes and train with Tarsus. And I think I jumped into a couple classes with Jason down there as well.
Okay.
But I just kind of bounced around for a little bit. I came here for, I think, a couple classes.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I came here for a couple classes. And then, of course, I trained at Edgewater. But and I trained at Longwood a couple times too.
Okay.
You know, so I was just kind of trying to feel out the vibe. And it just seemed like Cogito was a good place for me.
So
you know,
what?
it was a good fit.
So you actually being the most senior person here right now. I started in 05. You started in 03, right? So what of all the different places you've trained, what do you look for in the gym?
It's mostly just kind of, you know, I guess you could say, like I said, it, you know, it was a vibe, but it was like, you know, the one thing about Cogito is that it's a lot of, for one, guys who, you know, they're focused on getting better at the art. Right. You know, it's not an MMA school, you know, so you don't get a lot of the knuckleheads that you get with MMA schools. But most of the guys there are really intellectual as well. You know, we have conversations like this on a regular, you know, and we sit down, we talk about, you know, conceptual aspects of jiu-jitsu, but we talk about so many other things as well. In fact, there's like a group of like 10 of us who are in like a messenger chat group that we call the Golden Girls, that we just sit and we talk about anything existential, you know, and we talk about, everything and nothing. And sometimes it's just, locker room knucklehead banter. And sometimes it's, something that's, very existential and has to do with, some kind of idea that we're wrestling with in life. You get a lot of that there, which is kind of appropriate because the name is Cogito, and that comes from, I think it's pronounced Cogito, to think there I am, Cogito ergo sum or whatever, Latin root.
You're an English teacher, not a Latin teacher.
Yeah, sorry,
you get a pass.
It's not my expertise. So Cogito means to think or to be aware, and I think that most of the people that train there, they are that. We're aware, we think, and we have on and off the mat discussions that are like, they really help me grow as a person. And there's dads there. There's a lot of dads there. So we get to share ideas about parenting and about, about fatherhood and about, being a husband and about like balancing our lives activities. And, it's just a good outlet for us. It's a good place to get together and choke out your friends.
How, so as a dad now, asking you, how hard is it for you right now to try to be open-minded and not try to turn your 3 kids into little yous? It's a challenge, right? Like, because to try to have to eliminate, or not eliminate, but at least filter your own prejudices to allow your child to see the world through their own eyes and not necessarily yours.
Katie's a good balance for that, because me and Katie are very different. We are very different people, and it's to our benefit, it's really to our benefit. We complement each other really well, which is, I think, one of the best things you can ask for in a marriage. And, so we have ideas that are even in conflict with one another when it comes to raising our children. For example, like, Noah's 5 now and he's in school, he's in kindergarten, and I'm always telling him, don't tattle, don't tattle on kids, don't tell on anybody. The only time you want to tell on somebody is if they're going to hurt themselves, they're going to hurt you, or they're going to hurt someone else. That's the only time to go tell an authority figure that someone's doing something wrong. Otherwise, leave it alone. You let them, if they're going to break the rules, you let them break the rules. You do what's the right thing. You do the right thing and let them navigate their own life, more or less is what I tell them. But don't worry about, anything unless, again, they're going to hurt you, they're going to hurt themselves, they're going to hurt someone else. Otherwise, you just leave them alone. Whereas Katie's like, no, it's his job to enforce the rules. It's his job to assert himself. If he feels like someone's doing something wrong and it's doing harm to him in some way, even if he feels bad about it, then it's okay for him to tell people. And it's like, well, I don't agree with that. But I think even though he gets these 2 different perspectives, as he grows, he's going to be able to discern what the truth is for him, what works best for him in different circumstances, and there may be circumstances where either one of those things is more true. And I think he's going to have that ability to do that because he gets these 2 different perspectives. Now, as far as trying to model them into me, would I love all my kids to grow up and do jiu-jitsu? Yeah. And I would almost say it's almost mandatory for Addison because she's a girl, and I want her to know this. But I also want them to have their own passion for it, So, like, the boys right now, they're both in gymnastics. And Noah was doing the kids class at Cogito for a little while, which was great for me because I was able to help out Dylan. And one area of jiu-jitsu that I think is really missing for me is teaching. I was just telling this to Kyle Lesher the other day is that, I feel like I need to teach more in order to gain mastery over jiu-jitsu because I feel like that's one area that I'm weak in. And he was like, well, you're a teacher. Why,
why wouldn't you, right?
I wouldn't think that would be difficult for you to teach jiu-jitsu. I'm like, yeah, but it's different. It's not the same. Teaching
I would think
wrestling,
it's actually easier.
It's not. I think... You know how there's those people in jiu-jitsu, it's like they can't teach, but they can do really well?
Yeah.
I think I do things, and I don't always know why I do them. And every time I teach jiu-jitsu, when I teach a technique, even something that I think I have mastery over that I'm really good at, sometimes people notice, they're like, oh, you did this when you did it. I'm like, oh, that's what I'm doing. I don't even realize I'm doing this, but that's what I'm doing. So then that's something I have to integrate into my teaching. And sometimes you have to teach things differently to different people because everybody has different learning styles. Everybody picks up on things differently. So when I teach things, it's like learning what to teach, learning when to teach. You can teach those black belt details, but sometimes you teach so many of those black belt details that it's overwhelming to the people who are learning. It's overwhelming to learners.
I'm guilty of that. So you've always been a student of jiu-jitsu in terms of like you've never. I was thrown into teaching jiu-jitsu pretty early.
Right. So you have that.
Yeah, like have you always? So you've always been a student.
I've helped out here and there, but I've mostly been a student, and I would say even more so, I've mostly been a competitor in some fashion since I've been training. Ever since I started really dedicating myself to martial arts, I've always been a competitor. So my training was always even geared towards competition. And it wasn't until these later years that it's really, I've focused on being a student and focusing on the finer and minute details. And that's where my game has really leveled up.
How many grappling tournaments or competitions have you been in, roughly?
I don't even know.
When's the last one that you did?
The last two competitions, which went really well, you could ask Derek and he would say, even though I've had so much competition, I've always been better. I've always been one of those, gym champions. Is like in the gym, I'm really good. And then sometimes I can't translate that into competition because I get there and like the anxiety, makes me revert to like a blue belt form of myself rather than using, all my purple belt or brown belt techniques and the things that I've come to master at that level. But my last two competitions, I had a grappling match. It was Laleo Code. It was a single grappling match against a purple belt competitor. His name's Eric Smith. You could Google that name and you'll find a million of them. And but it was
Eric Smith Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah,
we just find
you might find one. Yeah. But that went really well for me. And he was a purple belt then. I had just recently gotten promoted to brown. But we had already had our competition set up, and
you finished him via leg lock, right?
I finished him with a rear naked choke.
Okay.
Rear naked choke. I had set up a leg lock, and then we ended up transitioning, and then I ended up on his back, and it finished from there. Which I was happy about because I'm always upset when I take somebody's back and then I don't finish it because I feel like that should be a finished position. When you take someone's back, you should be able to finish from there. So I was happy about that. And then prior to that, I went to the IBJJF Orlando, the summer event, and I competed in all four, divisions. So
your weight class and absolute
Masters 2, but it was gi
and no
Masters 2, and then open gi, and then no gi Masters 2, which was the next day, and then open.
Yeah.
And I swept all four divisions. I took 4 golds that weekend.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
And that was as a purple belt.
How many
I think
people
that's
were-
when
how
Dylan
many
was probably
people-
like, maybe he's ready for the
How many
next
people
level.
were in your brackets?
I think that weekend I had like a total of 10 matches.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't a lot. Masters 2 is usually pretty slim. I think the first day I had like 5 or 6 matches, and the second day I had 5 or 6 matches. So maybe 12
That's
matches.
a lot of competition experience in 2 days.
Yeah, it was good though.
That's awesome. So as we wind down here, what we always like to ask, like, what are your goals now moving forward for jiu-jitsu?
As a newly minted brown belt, right? Like you're 2 months into it now.
I got my brown belt in the fall.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty new to brown belt. Right now, I just want to get strong. My focus, when I started lifting and started training, my focus was to get stronger. And
What's your protocol?
I'm still kind of adjusting to that weight. I just want to do, like right now, my focus is always to at least get in the 4 major lifts every week. So, deadlift, standing overhead press, bench press, and then squat. So that's all my exercises around that. And then I have hypertrophy sets after those main lifts that I do as well that are supplemental to those lifts. So, I have, those are my 4 main days, and I rotate those days.
And how many hours a total a week?
I do about 45 minutes a day, 4 or 5 days a week. And then I have 2 grappling sessions, usually on Saturday and Sunday. So I have those my jiu-jitsu sessions, and I'm trying to get 1 sprint day in as well because I haven't been running.
Have you noticed or had to modify your jiu-jitsu now that you're? Because I saw you. It was at Dylan's daughter's birthday party.
Yeah.
That I had to rush out of there, but like. You came in, I was like, God damn, like I haven't seen you in a couple months. Like, how much fucking weight did this guy put on?
Yeah.
And you, at that point, you were probably 190 or 205 or whatever.
Yeah,
the case
I haven't adjusted yet. I really haven't. I feel like I was actually better at jiu-jitsu at 180 or 185 than I am now because I gas out super quickly. Because
even though you feel a cardio difference.
Yeah, I mean, even though I have more muscle, because you have more muscle, you use more energy.
Yeah, it's just metabolically more. Yeah,
exactly. Taxing. And so I'm still trying to move like I'm 180 or 185, I gas out pretty quickly. So I'm learning to use my weight and my strength to my advantage. But, one thing as I started lifting with Dylan that he told me, he's like, at this level, like, how hard is it to get 10% better jiu-jitsu? It's like, it's kind of tough.
It's very
hard,
yeah.
And he's like, but how hard is it to get 10% stronger, especially if you haven't been training? If you haven't been lifting, how hard is it to get 10% stronger? He's like, that's so much easier. And so it's like, well, that's what I'm trying to do right now.
So
I'm
you're
trying
finding
to get 10%
more
stronger.
low hanging fruit to improve the overall
game.
That's awesome.
So that's where I'm kind of at right now. I'm trying to get strong. I'm really trying to take a year off of competition, so no competition in 2020.
Really?
Just get strong, focus on getting better at jiu-jitsu and kind of adapting my game to my new body, and maybe next year train again because I'm a brand new brown belt. I don't need to compete right now. Let's get better. Let's really solidify my gains in both lifting and jiu-jitsu at the brown belt level, and then when I'm ready to, now let's break into competition.
How will you modify your training schedule? You said you right now getting 2, maybe 3 days a week of jiu-jitsu.
Again,
how are you going to be able to taper up to get more days in? I mean, just with being as busy as you are. I mean, like, I find it hard, and I have one kid, and
Well, one of the advantages of being a teacher is that you get so much time off. So winter break, spring break, and summer break, those are usually the times when I get extra training sessions in.
Okay.
And I've actually had the opportunity over the summers to really, I level up then because I get, at least one more session in with Dylan, and then usually 2 or 3 more sessions in with Derek. Because Derek will either make time for me an extra day, or definitely I can go to the 6 a.m. classes on Tuesday and Thursday with Derek. And so Derek helps me to really advance my game during those times. Is he your main training partner? I would say so. Yeah, I would say so. I think it's fair to say that Derek is my main training partner. And he has such an outstanding understanding of jiu-jitsu, and he knows how to adapt jiu-jitsu to different people's styles so well. He's a very cognitive person, very intelligent. And, so he knows my game, and he doesn't try to change my game. He's like, let's try to make adjustments for your game. And he's really helped me with that big time.
What have you, how have you seen your game transition over the years?
I think I've grown more in jiu-jitsu in the past 3 years training at Cogito than I have in jiu-jitsu during my whole training time. And I think part of that's because my focus has changed to strictly jiu-jitsu. I don't really do striking anymore. I do shadow boxing every now and then, and that's about it.
It's fun to hit the bag.
Yeah. But I don't do any striking training. Everything's jiu-jitsu. So my grappling expertise has leveled up 100%. Just training with, Derek and Dylan, and now Jose. And Jose is like, he was like a curveball to the gym. Like, he came out, brown belt, already at black belt level, and he just recently got promoted to black belt. And he came in and just changed. I think he leveled everybody up because he brought something different to the gym that we didn't have. Same energy, like happy and loving and friendly, but like a different jiu-jitsu style. Like his style is very similar to mine in that it's like, it's top game, heavy, mean, a little bit nasty, Oh,
I've seen you out there at y'all's promotion, man. Like, you're like, we need to invite him over to the next gauntlet.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome.
He's sitting there like, no way. He's like that guy,
But Jose has this, system, and he's got this series that I've adapted to my style. I call it the Puerto Rican pressure series because he's out of Puerto Rico, but I call it the Puerto Rican pressure series. But it's like a knee on belly, knee on face, and this elbow to the sternum, and these 3 different positions that you can transition to and from. And I've adopted that into my game, and it's just like, it's leveled me up because it's given me a position to attack from very well. In these 3 different transitions that set up, back take and arm bar and Kimuras and, things that I was already pretty well versed at, but now it's given me a way in there. It's given me a new path into there and a way to control my opponents. And it's a control through a pressure, like a different kind of pressure. It's not like simply control. It's like pressure and making you react. So it's been beautiful for me.
So are you going to be training with us today?
Yeah, I'm here for you guys.
Right on. So we get to see this in action.
Yeah, man.
Dude, we got to wrap things up. We got to
Let's do
get
it.
ready. But thank you so much for your time,
Thank you
Chris.
very much
Did you
for
have
having
anything? You know this guy better than I did.
Well, that's just it. Is I barely know him, but I know. I guess I do know him better than you. I was telling Noah yesterday when he's like, "Hey, is there a primer I need to like give you?" I was like, you guys actually met. It was at Buffalo Wild Wings. Actually, you were sitting at the table with me, Derek. It was when that fight broke out.
Right, right,
and you were.
It was afterwards, right?
Yeah, it was that day. But he was there too, and you were a
Yeah,
new
he
student
was-
then.
yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
like
I think all the faces were a blur.
yeah. But so like you met in passing.
Derek
But,
was making fun of me because I'm like, we were talking then, and we were talking about like mob mentality and how like gang mentality. Like, oh, if a fight broke out, would you jump in? I'm like, no, I would just try to break it up, and I wouldn't be there. I'd try to talk you guys out of it, and da-da-da. And then a fight breaks out, and I run down there to make sure
like,
everything's cool.
so-
he's like, it's the opposite of what you said. I
So
knew
they
it.
thought it was me who was getting in a fight.
Yeah.
And so Derek, who I trained with at Winter Springs,
no.
ran down there, and he was that was.
So I run down to support Derek, who
How long had you been
supported
with
Chris.
Cogito at that point? Like you were fairly new there.
I don't know. I think what was that? It was that a year and a half after I had been here, probably
think so,
something
probably,
like
yeah,
that. You know.
So you had just probably gotten your bearings at Cogito. at
Yeah,
that point,
I mean,
like-
I feel like I fell into that. I feel like the vibe was very similar to like the World Vibe that we trained at
Right,
in
right.
Tallahassee. Like it's like a community of guys that are like-minded individuals who we're just there to train and grow and have fun and learn
to
more
support
about
each other,
life.
right? Like that's a big thing, and to support each other.
Yeah,
like,
to support
that's
each other.
awesome.
Exactly, support each other's
A
growth.
tribe, you might
Yeah,
say.
exactly, a tribe. Yes.
But thank you for coming out, man. I'm
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
really glad
It's great
that
being
you were
here.
able to. Any shout outs you want to make out to? Obviously, Cogito. Right?
Shout out to Cogito. Shout out to Edgewater Jiu-Jitsu. Shout out to all my training partners. Suda Martial Arts in Illinois. Ron and Tashi Hill. Shane.
Saying that would be a minor miracle, but I like
Yeah.
it.
No, we'll have to tag you. If anybody, I'm familiar with social media. You're fairly active on there. How would somebody want to reach out to you if they want to get like a private from a new brown belt?
You can reach out to me on Facebook at Stan Rousonelos, Rousonelos. It's that long Greek name that's hard to pronounce.
It's Greek?
Oh, it is.
I'm terrible. I was like, oh, it sounds Russian. I'm terrible.
Or on Instagram, I'm at s.russo, Rouso. That's the name I go by in the classroom. So you can reach me on there.
Awesome.
Yeah. I look forward to rolling with you guys after class.
God, he just did the thing. I hate that so much.